Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello and welcome. So happy to be here with you today, and thank you so much for listening. If you haven't yet subscribed, I highly encourage it. Today, we are going to talk about emotions because as highly sensitive people, we have a lot of them, right? And we feel them deeply. So let's understand them, like where they come from, what they're really about, what's really going on here with these things called feelings that have so much power in our lives. What I want to share today is it's really where like emotional power comes from, where so much of our power in our lives and the influence that we do have over our experience of our lives and our love lives, our marriages, it really comes down to what I'm going to share with you today. Now, today's episode is kind of like part 2 to the last episode, which was Emotional Delegation 101. And in this episode, you're going to hear lots of examples of what it looks like to delegate and of where feelings really come from. So you can leave emotional delegation behind and step into emotional agency. So if you missed last episode, definitely have a listen to that one. But you can only step into emotional agency, which is the goal, because that's where great relationships truly come from. You can only step into emotional agency. You can only become a real agent of your emotions when you really understand where your feelings come from, where they truly come from. So this episode might sound familiar to those of you who have been dedicated listeners of the podcast because it is an updated and revised version of episode 14, which is called The Best News About Your Feelings. So that's what I think of this episode as. Yes, I'm going to tell you where your feelings really come from, but it really is the best news about your feelings. So even if you did hear that episode in the past, definitely listen in today because this updated episode has new information for you. And I think will really bring home a lot of what I was saying in the last episode as well. So perk those ears up and listen. So I'll just say it right off the bat. Emotions are things that we create with our thinking. Emotions come from our thoughts or our perceptions. And I'm going to be using that word thoughts or even perceptions. I might use those interchangeably, but as umbrella terms. So I want you to take those words with a grain of salt for a moment until I can get to describing what I really mean when I use those terms. So sit tight for that. But our emotions, they don't just happen to us randomly or because of things other people do or say. We think that other people make us feel certain ways, right? Because that's even the language we use. They made me feel this way. Sarah made me feel this way when she said that thing, right? That's what we're taught. And so, of course, we think that other people make us feel how we feel. And no one else ever knew to slow you down to show you that that's not actually how it works. Mostly because no one ever thought to do that for you because no one in your life really even knew this. So our feelings come from our thoughts. Now, I'd like to sort of put a little caveat on this, that it's maybe not 100% of the time that this is true. I would love to invite you to try on the idea that it's always true, because it's very empowering when you get this. But let's leave a little wiggle room, and I'll explain why in a minute. But let's say the very majority of the time this is true. That feelings come from our thoughts, and maybe even like 99% of the time. Now, the exceptions I just want to name them. The exceptions, of course, are like when someone jumps out in front of you, like my son, boos me. He does that sometimes. He hides behind like the stairs when I'm walking up the stairs and he jumps out. And oh man, I think you probably, as a highly sensitive person, might know, like we tend to be a little bit more, like we have a really strong startle response. That is a different thing going on. That's not the feeling of being startled and afraid like that. That's not coming from your thought. That actually bypasses the sort of thinking part of your brain. Okay. So that's one exception. Another exception is like if there's a hormonal imbalance, more like if there's like a thyroid issue, right? Or other things that are interfering with some of the chemical stuff going on that are actually health issues. And that can include things like low blood sugar or PMS. But even depression, now I'm not going to say all of it, but even depression is oftentimes because of the patterns of thinking that we have, right? It actually changes our brain chemistry. Now, there are exceptions to that too. There are times when there are things going on biochemically that come first and that create those feelings. Okay. But not to get too complicated or deep into this. A couple other fun, kind of interesting, I think that was really fascinating for me to learn. A couple other things that can actually trigger like a fight or flight feeling that do not come from our thinking, do not come from our thoughts or our unconscious thoughts, are these. Apparently, when we humans see a very blank face, like not a mean face or a happy face, but a very flat expression, like flat affect, right? It's actually very triggering. And this is like, it goes in the sort of just the primal part of us and creates a feeling of lack of safety, right? Or maybe we'd call that fear. Another thing that does this is deep voices. Now, I haven't really truly experienced this, but apparently it's a true thing for mammals. That mammals, when they hear deep, deep sounds, like a deep male voice, it can actually be very triggering and create very unsafe feelings. Because like our predators, way back before we were even like humans, right, were always deep voiced, low sounding things. That makes sense. So these things, blank faces, deep voices, I'm sure there's a few other things like that, hit at us at a level it's like wired into our species and it's below sort of that conscious thought. So those don't really apply here. Those things do make us feel a certain way. But there's some of the very few exceptions. Most of our feelings come from our thoughts. And I know, at first I was like, oh, what? Are you crazy? But I've become completely sold on this, and I want to help you understand this too, because it's one of the best pieces of news I've ever heard when I finally understood what this means and how this happens. So I know that I have said our thoughts create our feelings before, but I really wanted to slow down today and focus on this so you can really see this, because it's incredibly liberating and incredibly empowering to deeply understand this. So here are a few brief examples. This is an example, actually a personal example. So I had a boyfriend who was very polite. Like, he was really into opening doors for me. I was raised in a family where that just wasn't a thing, right? Like old-fashioned gentlemanly stuff. And when he started doing that, my original response, or the thought that I would have, I wasn't 100% aware of what the thought was in the moment, but upon reflection, this was definitely the thought. I don't need him to open the door for me. Doesn't he know I'm totally capable? Right? A thought like that led me to feeling offended. Not that I expressed that with him. I was kind of timid back then. But the point is, doesn't he know I'm totally capable? Created a feeling of feeling offended, right? So in the same circumstance where he's opening the door, I could have the thought, he's so caring and thoughtful to me. And if I had that thought, I would feel valued, right? Or I could have the thought, isn't that nice of him? Totally reasonable thought, right, to have. And if I had that thought, I'd feel admiration or gratitude, right? So another example. So let's imagine this situation. You're sitting on the couch with your husband. You haven't had an interesting conversation with him in a week. And this is the third night sitting together watching a show. And you have the thought, we just don't connect. Or we just don't connect like we used to, right? You will feel, most likely, a feeling like disconnected or lonely or disappointed when you're thinking like that, right? Another person, or you in a different day, could have a thought like, even when you're just sitting right there, you could be thinking, of all people, this man right here, he chose me to love. And then you'll feel love and connection. So I actually had a client, actually she's not the only one, but she's one that's at top of mind. A client who had the thought, actually rather frequently, we just don't connect. That was kind of like this refrain that kept going through her head. So I actually challenged her on that. I had her tell me how they do actually connect. Because I had heard her mention fairly frequently, actually, things that they did together. All sorts of things they did together or conversations that they had. So I asked her to tell me how they do connect. So she paused and thought for a moment, and then she shared all sorts of moments of connection that happened, not just once in a while, but daily. She just spouted all these ways that they're connecting out. And as she did so, as she started to have these thoughts of we do connect here, we do connect here, we do connect like this, her voice changed. And she started to feel I could feel in her voice, right? Relaxed, happier. And she actually told me that she felt really warm, like that warm feeling, heart-centered feeling. And just really good to notice how much connection she actually has with him. And she even said that she felt really hopeful about their marriage again. The really interesting thing was nothing changed, right? Externally. No situation was different. It was literally one moment and then the next moment. Different thoughts, different feelings. So I want to offer you one more kind of experience around this. So imagine that you have agreed as a couple, you and your hubby, have agreed that he does the breakfast dishes, right? This is just how you've delegated some chores. And one morning he's left for work and you're still at home and you notice the dishes are not done. And you feel annoyed. So most of us will be like, I feel annoyed because of him. I feel annoyed because he left the dishes in the sink, right? Those things made me feel annoyed. But that's actually not the truth. If you look a little closer, you're going to see you are having a bunch of thoughts about the dishes in the sink, about the fact that he left them in the sink, right? You probably would have thoughts like, he should have done them. What's wrong with him? Why does it all fall on me? He doesn't pull his weight. Or even gross, dishes. I hate leftover dishes, right? Something like that. Those thoughts are going to create feelings of annoyance or frustration or anger or resentment or burden, right? Those thoughts create those feelings. Now imagine that he texts you 2 minutes later, right? And he tells you in this text about how he just made a reservation at your very favorite restaurant for tomorrow night. And that he also called the babysitter and got coverage. So you guys can have a night out together and then you're going to go hear some music, right? And he also tells you how excited he's to spend that evening with you. How are you going to feel? Totally depends on your thoughts, right? But it's very likely that you'd suddenly have a bunch of very different thoughts that are much more positive going through your mind, right? You might be thinking, that's so sweet. He's thinking about me. He loves me. Whatever. And you might look over at those dishes and the fact that they're there really wouldn't be that much of a problem in the moment. They'd still be there. But you may even have the thought he's the best husband. And even as you're looking at the dishes, as you're thinking these thoughts about what a great husband he is, you'll feel loved and lucky. that you have this man in your life. Yeah. So our thoughts lead to our feelings. Our thoughts about the circumstance, right? The situation lead to our feelings. Now, this seems like an excellent spot to go a little deeper into what I mean by the word thoughts. And again, remember, I can use this word perceptions, and that actually might be more of an accurate word or more of an accurate umbrella term instead of this word thoughts. Now, you might have caught when I said unconscious thoughts at one point, because that word unconscious is actually a very big clue into the broader thing that's going on here that really make up this idea of thoughts. So when I say thoughts, what I really mean is all the things that make up what I call your personalized filter. Now, you may have heard me use this term before, but it's really important to understand what your personalized filter is. So it really is simply the lens through which your own unique brain and nervous system interprets or sees and interprets all the things that happen out there in the world beyond your body and makes meaning out of it, right? Based on your history. So this really means we see through a filter. We do not see or perceive the truth. We do not perceive accurately. We experience life always through this filter, our own unique personalized filter. By default, your human brain generates emotions in response to things that happen outside of you, like something your partner says or does. And those emotions are not purely based on what was actually said or done, but based rather on how your unique life experiences over the course of your life have shaped your brain. In other words, you are never experiencing emotion in direct response to what your partner says or does or what they don't do, but rather you are feeling feelings based on how what your partner says or does is filtered through your personal filter, which again was shaped by your unique history. So of course, as I've already been doing, we can call this personal filter your thoughts. But it's really your own unique subconscious and conscious web of your past experiences, but mostly stuff below the level of your awareness, right? So subconscious or even unconscious. And specifically, it's made up of your subconscious associations based on those past experiences. It's made up of old pre-programmed beliefs and biases that come out of your cultural and familial conditioning and historically built associations and generalizations literally wired into your body, mind, heart system. So to say that in a maybe a simplified way, you have beliefs and biases that you've been taught, that you've been conditioned to believe, that you've never questioned because they were kind of rammed into you. A great example, not to get too meta here, is the concept or the belief that other people make us feel a certain way. You were conditioned to believe that, even though it's a lie. So this personal filter is also made up of your nervous system wirings. So some of that is based in genetics, like high sensitivity, right? That is a condition or a wiring into your nervous system, but it's not like you made it happen to yourself. It's genetically passed down, at least to a high degree. Now, your nervous system wirings are also based on how attuned or unattuned your caregivers were in your most early years, and also things that have happened to you, especially while you were developing. Speaking of the nervous system, your personalized filter is also dependent on your nervous system state in the moment. So I've talked a lot recently on the podcast about the different states in your nervous system and how they affect you. But basically, there are 3 or 4 primary nervous system states that you can be in: fight, flight, freeze, and then like the calm and connect and rest digest states. And depending which state you're in, that's going to affect your personalized filter. Your personalized filter is also made up of your biochemistry in the moment, like what I said earlier, like your blood sugar, like what you ate for lunch today, like where you are on your hormonal cycle. All of these things do very much affect your personalized filter. Another very, very important thing that affects your filter are your implicit memories. It's kind of a fancy term, but implicit memories are unconscious memories or past experience or events, oftentimes painful, but not always, that get stored in your body. And they arise as emotion, oftentimes very strong emotion, when certain cues happen out in the world, like say a tone of voice. So this emotion is often out of proportion to what is actually happening. Like when you get triggered, this is often what's happening. And this is because your brain is kind of believing that something that happened in the past is actually happening now and is reacting as if that thing were happening now, even though that same thing is not happening now. It might just be somewhat similar. Now, this is so fascinating and so important that I highly, highly recommend you go back and listen to episode 129 for a really good understanding of this. And that episode is called Getting Triggered, Why It Happens and What to Do About It, I believe. Now, the last thing that I want to share that our filter is made up of, your personalized filter is made up of, is your survival fears and your judgments and your ideas and your expectations and your rules, or your, what I call your relationship rule book, your rules about how things should be. So you can see your filter, your personalized filter, is rather complex. Yes? But it's really important to understand that this filter leads to your unique way of interpreting the world out there. And it's always going to be unique because your filter is built up of very unique to you history, very unique to you experiences. So as you look at the world and your partner through your filter, as you look at your relationship and even your own self through your filter, that's going to alter and impact the feelings that come up for you. It's going to generate the feelings. It's going to be the cause of the feelings rather than the thing you're looking at. Now, I want to add one more thing that makes up your filter, which is what I've already said very clearly. Yes, your thoughts, your very, like the sentences that go through your mind, those also make up your filter, very, very much so. And in fact, those thoughts are one of the easiest ways to work with your filter, with your feelings, to guide and alter and influence and control, if you will, the way that you feel. Working with those conscious thoughts is one of the most easy and powerful way to really take charge of and be in charge of your emotions. So all of those things make up your filter. And what's really important to understand is we see through this filter most of the time below the level of our consciousness, right? By default, all the time. We make meaning through this filter. We create narrative, we create story or conscious thought, like I was just talking about, through this personal filter. And those thoughts, that meaning that we make, determines our emotions. So for another example, if your partner is irritable with you, or if he doesn't put his phone down when he's talking to you or you're talking to him, or when he doesn't hug you after you've been apart for a day or so, or a few days, and your feelings get hurt. If that hurts when one of those things happens, or brings up other hard emotions like fury or a sense of being unimportant or uncared for, it is not so much that his action of looking at his phone instead of listening to you, or not hugging you, or being slightly irritable with you, it's not so much that action of his caused those feelings, but rather those things cued your mind, body, heart system to run unconscious programming inside of you that brings up that hurt, that fury, that sense of unimportance, because of your own personal filter and how it was built from conditioning and past experiences. In other words, you saw through your personal filter that was filled with unresolved hurts and beliefs about what it means when your partner doesn't listen to you or doesn't hug you. So this filter and the emotions that it generates will unconsciously, blindly, reactively drive our life and our relationship, certainly our behavior in our relationship, which will very much lead to how our relationship is. This filter will drive all of that until we slow down enough to look at and see how our thoughts, our stories, and our unconscious stuff in there, or subconscious stuff in there, is generating those feelings, is deeply affecting us. So it's really, really important to pay attention to our feelings and then tracing them back to our thoughts and the meaning we're making, and then to learn how to guide them. Because you can guide them. You can consciously choose how you see instead of always seeing through that old unconscious default filter. You can absolutely perceive in a way that serves you emotionally in your relationship so much better. You really can reprogram your stories, your thoughts, and all that unconscious and subconscious stuff in your filter. And you can do so in a way that deeply serves your love life, that can radically transform your relationship into one that is so much more of what you want, because it changes how you show up, which changes how your partner responds, and the whole relationship becomes new. So if that sounded a little complex or even slightly confusing, that's one reason when clients come to coach with me, I break it down for them into a simple step-by-step layered process. So each step is simple and easy to implement, and you don't even have to understand or use fancy terms like implicit memory. So now that you have a better understanding of what I really mean when I use that term thoughts or perceptions, let's go back and simplify things again. So the very simple recipe of where your feelings really come from is from your thoughts. There are circumstances out there in the world that give rise to our thoughts, i.e. that whole thing I just talked about, your personalized filter. And as you perceive through that, as you think through that filter, it gives rise to your feelings. So now I want to offer a subtle but important clarification here. That's so important. Our feelings actually really happen when we believe our thoughts, not just because a thought goes through our mind. Right? There are thoughts that kind of come up and move through our mind, and we don't really give them a lot of weight or pay much attention. Right? So I'm going to offer you another little experience here. I want you to think of, and if you're a woman, unfortunately, this may be, you're most likely to be able to do this really well, because I want you to think about a part of your body that you aren't enamored by, that you feel a little bad about. Just call it to mind. And then I want you to imagine that I came up to you and I said to you, I hate your fill in the blank, right? Like, I don't know, maybe you picked your thighs. And I said something like that. I was like, I said, I hate your big thighs. Sorry to do this to you right now, but it's a really powerful understanding to get. So I said that to you. How would you feel? I do this with clients. I run them through this little exercise, and almost always they will say, I feel hurt, like I feel bad, I feel awful, like that stings, ouch. So just notice that. If you can imagine into that scenario, hearing words like that about something that you personally don't like about yourself. Okay, now just shake free of that feeling. Let it go. I definitely do not think your body is in any way less than awesome and beautiful. And I hope that's true for you too. Okay, but now imagine, different scenario. I come up to you and I'm like, hey, that tattoo on your face is the ugliest thing I've ever seen. You look awful with it on your face. How would you feel then? And this is assuming you don't actually have a tattoo on your face. You'd probably think I was kind of crazy. And you'd probably just be like, what the heck? You might be confused or just weirded out by me, but you would not feel hurt, right? You wouldn't feel personally attacked or hurt because you do not believe you have a tattoo on your face. So that's the difference. In the first example, you believed my words. Like you believed that your thighs were too big, that they weren't the way they should be, that they were ugly, right? And so my words were much more impactful to you because you believed it was actually maybe true that you have ugly thighs. Whereas you don't believe you have an ugly tattoo on your face, right? You have very different thoughts about it and you don't believe my thoughts. So that's really important to see that it's what we believe. It's the thoughts that we believe that create the feelings, right? So I just wanted you to see that because it's so empowering to be able to see, for one, it's our own thoughts that create our feelings. And so much of our pain comes from our thinking, right? Particularly when we're believing the thoughts that go through our mind, right? And like I talked about in, I keep referring back to this episode. It's totally an important foundational episode. So if you haven't heard it yet, go back to it. Episode 120, How to Work with Your Two Brains for More Love. Like when we're believing all those lizard brain fear-based thoughts that tend to go through the human brain, we create a lot of negative emotion, right? So that's just really important to see. When we can see that we are creating that because of the way we're thinking, we actually also get a glimpse into being able to possibly uncreate it by unbelieving those thoughts, by unthinking those thoughts, or thinking other thoughts, or reprogramming those thoughts, or that whole subconscious filter, that whole personalized filter, that can all be reprogrammed. You're not stuck with the personal filter that you have. Thank goodness. So you are getting a glimpse right now into seeing that we have the power to guide and steer and create our feelings. So I always love empowering people to take responsibility in their relationship, to take responsibility for their experience that they're having in their relationship, to take responsibility for the feelings they're having, which really is emotional agency. When you're responsible, when you know you're responsible for your feeling and you know how to take charge of those feelings, that's emotional agency. And it's so important for you, for your relationship. What I've been sharing today, this is why we can take so much responsibility for our experience. Because your experience, your emotional experience was never under anyone's control but your own. Your emotional well-being, your happiness, your sense of security, your sense of being like valuable and worthy and lovable and loved, it isn't dependent on others. It's dependent on your own thoughts and beliefs, which you can learn to be totally in charge of. No one is like feeding you your beliefs. Now, I will pause there for a moment and say, actually, you've been fed all sorts of beliefs that you've picked up on. Like you've picked up so many beliefs from the world around you. And of course, those are beliefs you might still have. And those beliefs are shaping your feelings. They are creating the feelings that you have. Right? But no one's making you believe those beliefs, right? Like once you start to see that they're there, you can decide if you want to believe them or not. You can rewrite them. You can choose better beliefs that serve you better from a gazillion options. So it is the way that your brain and your nervous system have been molded, the way your mind sees through its filter, the way we interpret things through that filter, what we make things mean through that filter, how our own mind, body, heart systems perceive, and whether or not we believe that perception. That is the source of your feelings, right? Not your husband. Now, I know this is a radical kind of thing to hear and take in, and this doesn't mean you always have to generate your own feelings all the time, and he should never do anything to create a great relationship with you. That's totally not what I'm saying, so don't spin it that way. I am saying like you have so much power here over how you feel, and that's such good news. We shape our own emotional experiences so deeply and so powerfully. We have so much power. And it's so amazing to be able to take responsibility for our feelings instead of making other people be responsible for our feelings. To be able to be in charge of them, to be the agent of them. It removes a lot of the need and the demand and so much of the power struggles that happen in relationships. So our thoughts and our way of perceiving, our programming, is so powerful. And by discovering what we're thinking and believing, by really seeing that, we can start to gain back so much control, so much influence over how we're feeling. We can soften our feelings. We can soothe our feelings. We can create the feelings we want, right? The ones that serve our marriages, like more love, like more connection, like more appreciation. And we can have a whole lot less of the ones that don't serve our marriage and just feel crappy. It's especially important to root out those ones, like the beliefs and thoughts that are creating pain and suffering where there doesn't need to be any. But we can also learn to think in ways that create the feelings that we want, right? Like I just said, like those best feelings in the world, like the best feeling in the world, love. Because ultimately, like that's really why you're here, right? For more love in your life. And that's why I'm here, to help you get that. You deserve to have all the love you want, really alive in your relationship. And my job is to help you get there. So I have reopened one-to-one coaching spots with me. And if you're interested in making your marriage full of mutual love and deep connection and supportiveness and all the good things, come coach with me. You're going to learn in depth how to become the agent of your own emotions, which really means the agent of your relationship. You're going to really fast track your way to feeling in control of how comforted you feel, how connected and secure, and how much love you feel in your marriage, without having to work hard to get your partner to do things differently. Love will never be so frustrating, so disappointing. Again, you're going to become the most powerful, loving force in your relationship and watch it deeply transform into the one you've always wanted to be. To learn more about private coaching with me and to take that next step to become my client, you can head over to hspmarriagecoaching.com and click the Work With Me Privately button, or you can go to the show notes for this podcast episode and there'll be some links there all about coaching with me. You can also read tons of past clients' stories and testimonials from them over there, so you can feel confident that coaching with me really will absolutely make your marriage so much better. But for now, just kind of sit with this potentially very brand new idea to you that our feelings are created by the thoughts and beliefs and that whole unique, personalized filter that we have in us. And just start to notice how, see if you can explore making that connection between the thoughts that you're thinking and the feelings that you're having. And one way to do that is simply to notice your feelings here and there, especially if you have a negative feeling, and just get into the practice of asking yourself, what am I thinking? What's the thought that I'm having right now? And see how the thought in your mind is going to, if you're feeling crappy, it's going to be a kind of not so great thought, right? Sort of negative-ish thought, a lizard brain thought. So just start exploring that for yourself. And it's really the first step to emotional agency. I hope you have a fabulous week and be oh so well.